Hello, this is Joe Meldrum, and welcome to this presentation on the MoSCoW method, which is a well-established prioritization technique used for the management of requirements. You may be asking yourself, how does this relate to software engineering? Well, let's jump right into it to understand how this technique can be applied to our roles as future software engineers. Before we jump into the details, we need to first understand the problem that this technique is trying to solve. As software engineers, one of the critical steps in developing software is the understanding of and implementation of business requirements. Roger Pressman, in The Practitioner's Guide to Software Engineering, identifies 7 tasks that are conducted as a part of the requirements engineering process: inception, elicitation, elaboration, negotiation, specification, validation, and requirement management. A problem we are often faced with in industry is that the needs of the business, which are quantified by requirements, often outweigh our available resources. These constraints may be budgetary, time-based, skill-based, or a result of a limited number of resources. This is where the art of negotiation, our 4th task highlighted here, plays a critical role in the process of requirements engineering. To solve for this problem, we must work with our key stakeholders to define the priority of the requirements to achieve maximum quality and satisfaction. Enter the MoSCoW method. The MoSCoW method was created by software development expert Di Clegg while he was working at Oracle to help him and his team prioritize tasks during product releases. The term MoSCoW is merely an acronym for must have, should have, could have, and won't have. Let's look at these each a bit further. The must-haves are the non-negotiable requirements, sometimes referred to as the minimum viable product or MVP. Without these, the feature or product is not functional. Alternatively, the requirements found in this category may be legally mandated. The should-haves are important to the project, but while it would be painful, the solution will still function without it, sometimes pending a potential workaround. The could-haves category could otherwise be stated as nice-to-haves. These come into scope only when there is extra other constraint we may have been faced with at the onset of this exercise: time, budget, etc. Won't have requirements are considered out of scope and set a clear expectation with stakeholders on what will not be included in this release or project. These should have no impact to the MVP scope. In order to effectively leverage the MoSCoW method, there are a few recommendations on how to effectively manage the negotiation process. But first, let's understand some assumptions about what enables this technique to be effective. It is important to have the requirements estimated, which on its own is an important software engineering practice. We'll save that for another video. The requirements at this stage of the process should also be clear, unambiguous, and well understood amongst the stakeholders. Regardless of whether or not this release is being managed in an agile or waterfall framework, the delivery team should have some level of domain expertise, and the risk of external forces being introduced that might cause delays should be considered minimal. If these assumptions are understood, we can proceed in the categorizing of requirements. As a best practice, the must-have effort should be to a level where the team's confidence of delivery is high, which typically represents no more than 60% of the overall effort. The could-haves, otherwise referred to as nice-to-haves, are meant to be set aside in the contingency bucket of effort, which typically represents 20% of the overall effort to complete that release. This leaves 20% effort for should-have requirements. The contingency bucket can be leveraged and should be flexible in cases where must-have and/or should-have requirements exceed the planned effort. Now let's look at a hypothetical example of how this might be applied to a new feature. Here we have a typical MoSCoW matrix with the four categories represented in each quartile of the matrix. Company XYZ is creating a new page search feature that will allow users to search their website for relevant products. At the top of the matrix, you can see as output of meeting with key stakeholders 8 business requirements that require prioritization. Let's look at what might be the typical walkthrough of categorizing these requirements. The feature itself is intended to allow the user to enter search criteria and return a result set. So the team has first decided that at a minimum, there should be a search field as well as a button for the user to click in order to return search results. Our friends in the legal department have also stated that the user should have the ability to manage their privacy settings. So we are required to put that functionality into our must-have category. Moving on to the should-have category, the marketing department has made a significant investment in this new feature, and as such, visual branding remains important to our customer base. For this feature, we've deemed it important to have not only our brand logo present on the search page, but also images of the products in the search results. As we look at the could have requirements, feedback from our field staff has suggested that competitors allow users to save their favorite searches and also have the ability to view their search history. While this is not critical to the functionality, we've put an emphasis on valuing our field force's feedback, and will consider these should our timeline and budget allow for it. Lastly, we've put the FAQ requirement into our won't have category, as the team is undecided on what the FAQ should contain and whether or not it is relevant to what the team believes is a simple feature with a fairly straightforward user experience. Now that you know a little bit more about the MoSCoW method approach and how it is leveraged to guide requirements negotiations, let's pause and think. Ask yourself, what are some potential drawbacks or shortcomings that might present themselves when using this technique? Take 5 seconds to pause this video and see what you come up with. Did you come up with any? Let's look at some common criticisms. While this list is not exhaustive or prioritized in any particular way, I've listed some common shortcomings that may come up if not properly managed. It is suggested to couple the prioritization exercise with an objective ranking system to avoid requirements being placed in the wrong category. The categorization of requirements could also be negatively impacted if key stakeholders, for example, executive leadership, are excluded from the process. There's nothing worse than getting to the end of a project and having the C-suite stop the release in its tracks. Finally, given its potential for subjectivity, bias can be exhibited, especially when like-minded individuals are the primary audience categorizing requirements. For example, in our previous exercise, the FAQ requirement was determined a won't have requirement. But what if the feature was being used as a training course developed to teach individuals how to use web pages? Some might argue that the FAQ becomes a should have, if not a must have requirement. This small list can be mitigated, but it should be recognized when applying the MoSCoW technique. MoSCoW gives you a simple, tangible way to demonstrate to all stakeholders how your project or product is prioritized. I've shared a few quotes from recognized individuals in the project management space, but the clear consensus is that when used appropriately, the MoSCoW method can help build consensus, communicate priorities, negotiate scope, and lay the path to moving on to the specification step in the requirements engineering process. As we've reached the end of this presentation, I invite you to check out some of the helpful resources listed below if you'd like to learn more about the MoSCoW method and how it can be applied to your project. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, this is Joe signing off.